All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here with our 2024 preview and prediction for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Looking at this coaching staff, Brent Key, 11-10 record through 2 seasons, doing a pretty good job as the lead man. Buster Faulkner, second year as the offensive coordinator. And Tyler Santucci, after being with Mike Elko last season as the DC at Duke, will now arrive here in Atlanta. Significantly overachieved last season for this team. I bet on their under win total. That ended up being a losing bet, because this team ended up making a bowl game. It starts with an offense that was fairly impressive. We've seen it early on against Louisville in week 1, where they were up pretty significantly in that game that they ended up losing. But you could see very early that this offense was going to be one that was going to be tough to contain. It mainly starts with Haynes King at quarterback. You knew this guy was an interesting prospect over at Texas A&M, had some bright spots, but more often than not, wasn't very good. This is a guy who showcases adequate arm strength, struggled with accuracy, decision-making, and ball security. Those were all things that were very transparent last year. He showed more good, though, for the Jackets than he did with the Aggies. He was already noted to be an impressive runner. Highly impressive athletic ability, shined in that regard, has good touch and can push it downfield. Wonder how much his mechanics will improve this upcoming season. Very good starter here. He's going to be productive again. King, I'd say, overachieved, Nick. He certainly still has those things he needs to work on, though, but in terms of having a guy that can, certainly make plays for you, 37 touchdowns last year, over 3,800 yards. This is a very good player.
This is a very strong quarterback that they bring in here, Haynes King. Didn't really work out for him at A&M. He showed a lot of bright spots. He had a really strong game throughout those seasons at A&M, had some great, impressive performance against some of the SEC big teams, including against Alabama, a game that people will never forget. And he had a decent season last year. I really didn't think it was that bad, right? 61% comp rate, 2,800 yards passing, and 27 touchdowns through the air. The 16 picks is the biggest issue. Definitely worries me with some of the control and accuracy at times. Throws into tough spots, tries to create a play that's not there, and that leads to turnovers. He's a very effective runner at 737 yards on the ground, 6.1 yards per carry, and 10 scores last year. So really successful on the ground. For him, he pitched in with 37 total touchdowns for him of total offensive production. Solid numbers overall. I think with another year in the system, another year in Key's system, and the way that he's continuing to develop him, this really works well. This is a pretty solid offense, a sneaky good offense that was more, a middle of the road and better at times unit that was a decent unit to watch. They put up some points, 31.1 points per game is not a bad number. When you have King returning, bringing back that experience, that's really solid for your team.
Yeah, and King, interceptions really were a problem. From September 30th to the 21st of October, in 3 straight games, he had 2+ interceptions. A couple weeks later, in November, he had 4 picks against Clemson in a loss. He completed 56% in those respective losses they had all year long. So this is a guy that certainly had plenty of downs. But I think if he can showcase those respective improvements and be better in terms of ball security and accuracy, this guy could really put up some better numbers. Looking at who he has next to him at running back, Jamal Haynes, a guy that's a strong, powerful runner, used a lot of outside zones, has shown good ability to stop on a dime and change directions quickly. Showcases great bursts that is. Had a couple of pretty unreal highlights, Nick, when I was watching some tape on this guy. This is a very impressive runner, one that's going to be probably not really talked about much at all leading into the season. 1,000-yard rusher, though, averaged over 6 yards per pop. This is a pretty impressive player, in my opinion. I was very impressed with what I saw. I think him and King can be a very effective duo, much like they were a season ago.
This is a solid running back room with Jamal Haynes that I think is a really good back that they returned almost 1,000 yards, or over 1,000 yards rushing last year, 6.1 yards per carry, and 7 scores for him. Really good numbers there. He's a good, solid back, elusive, also solid in the backfield with 20 grabs for 151 yards, receiving 7.6 yards per grab, and 1 score for him. Trayvon Cooley is also back there as well, who's not a bad back with 274 yards rushing and 3 scores for him last year. I like what they have here. This is a really solid group with a really nice two-headed monster up top with the quarterback and the top running back, plus some nice depth behind them with Cooley. I like what they can do on the ground this year. This should be a very effective unit again. That was a top 15 unit on the ground last year.
Yeah, Trey Cooley had a good start to the year. Not much after. He's proven to be a solid rotational piece, though, in his career. True freshman Anthony Carey, a dynamic player of balance and great vision. He and second-year player Evan Dickens will contend for third-string reps. Pretty solid group here at running back. Look at wide receiver. They're led by Eric Singleton, who was the highest-ranked player in last year's class for the Jackets. He instantly delivered, leading them in all categories as a pass catcher with his explosiveness. Has superstar written all over him at 5'11", 173. Outside wide receiver, has speed and playmaking. Malik Rutherford also has some speed and can stretch the field, but wasn't used much in that capacity. Only 11-yard per game figure. Be the primary slot with great hands. Christian Leary has plenty of versatility, and we'll see improved usage, I think, this season. Chase Lane at 6'1", 193. Also started at Texas A&M. has proven capable of being productive and making tough plays. Has just been unable to stay on the field in his entire career, which is unfortunate. But if he can stay healthy, this is a guy you can certainly lean on for some pretty impressive plays throughout the season. Abdul Janae from Duquesne barely played last year, but as a veteran that should be leaned on more this season. I'd say this is a good wide receiver room here, Nick. You should see some more explosive plays, though that's certainly what they're capable of accomplishing. I love Singleton and Rutherford, one of the better duos in this conference.
It's an extremely underrated wide receiving core. Singleton, a really strong physical wide receiver, led the team in all categories. 714 yards for him, 14.9 yards per grab, 6 scores as a true freshman last year. He burst onto the scene, had a really strong season. Blake Rutherford, 502 yards receiving, 10.9 yards per grab, and 4 scores for him. Solid numbers. Christian Leary, the former Bama product, who transferred over and had a solid season last year. At times, 309 receiving, 12.4 yards per grab, and 2 scores for him. Abdul Janine as well, 122 yards receiving for him, 20.3 yards per grab, and 2 scores. And Chase Lane only appeared in 7 games. He had 105 yards receiving on 7 grabs, 15 yards per grab, and a touchdown. So there's a lot of depth here, a lot of different pieces. I really like what they return. I think this is a really solid, underrated wide receiving core.
You know, to the offensive line, Ethan McKinney struggled a good bit at left tackle. He's only a true freshman, though, so he's destined to be better. Joe Fosley was much better at left guard, has accumulated a lot of snaps over 2 seasons, only sits at about 6'6", 302 pounds, though. Weston Franklin enters his 3rd year as a starter. Improved big time last fall, be more than a good starter this year for them. You know, right guard will be occupied by Kalen Rutledge, 6'4", 310. Was a quite good player at Middle Tennessee as a pass blocker, has gained some good experience the last 2 seasons. Jordan Williams, a right tackle. I thought he was an admirable performer when he was healthy. Pretty good upside for this O-line with some experience and quality play from last year. No real standout or high-end player. I know a lot of people in the past have been raving about Jordan Williams and what he can maybe accomplish. So maybe he evolves into one of those higher-end players that can contend for all conference. Overall, this O-line I think will be better, Nick, and I think overall it's going to help boost this offense.
Not a bad unit at all. Nothing that jumps off the screen. I think Jordan Williams is in line for a really strong season. I think he's going to take that step forward this year at right tackle with his new partner, Keelan Rutledge from Eastern Tennessee. I think it was a really decent add of the portal, a guy that had solid pass block for his previous program. The left side is a little bit weaker. I think Ethan McKinney will step up a little bit more this year. Obviously, a true freshman. He was thrust into that spot. Didn't look bad, though, last year. Did have a decent season overall. Joe Fosu as well at left guard is a big physical player who's decent at that left guard position. And Weston Franklin has got a nice amount of snaps under his belt, a good veteran leader at that center as a senior for this team. This is not a bad offensive line unit. If Williams can step up and reach those new heights that he's been expected for a couple of years now, that'll really go a long way for this unit.
Look at the verdict for this offense. This was a greatly balanced unit a season ago and figures to be much better than last year's. They struggled bad with turnovers and consistency. They'll be a fun unit to watch and will be capable of beating anyone on their schedule. I think if King takes those correct steps forward, I think this will be a very fun offense to watch all year long. Look at the defensive side of the ball. If they want to contend for more, they got to be able to provide on this side of the ball. 29.5 points per game allowed. Awful against the run. I mean, that's dead last right there. You can see 131st nationally. Had 11 guys in the portal, lost 17, returned only 4 starters, and starts with a D-line that returns Kevin Harris. He was a solid player, especially versus the run. Needs to significantly boost his production, but the potential is there. Joshua Robinson played nearly 200 snaps, was no good. Sylvian Yadadosin has been a very respectable force, a near 260-pounder from Belgium. Should be a good asset versus the run if healthy. Added Romello Height from USC. It wasn't awful at times. Should be a quality asset as a pass rusher. I think on the interior, they're much better here. Zeke Biggers is 6'6", 333, who has underperformed versus the run, but I think he's capable. He's going to be joined by proven nose guard Thomas Gore, who has been an elite run defender in his career. Just didn't see the field much at Miami last year, but previously at Georgia State was an impressive player. Makia Scott and Horace Lockett both played plenty of snaps last season, but failed to really materialize much of an impact. Lockett being a 6'6", 341-pound Atlanta native, enters his 2nd season of on-field action. The loss of Kyle Kennard is massive, though, for the D-line. The rest of them really struggled to spawn negative plays. Should see reasonable improvements here, though. But Nick, again, losing Kennard, who transfers to South Carolina, that's going to be major for this team, as he really was great at just forcing negative plays, and the rest of the unit just wasn't.
This is certainly a big loss from losing Kennard, who was really strong and physical on that defensive line. They have a couple different pieces that are hoping to try and fill those holes. Kevin Harris, 27 total tackles from last year, 2 tackles for loss and a sack. Horace Lockett looked pretty solid in his rotational snaps, 25 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss for him. He needs to find a way, if he can get more time on the field overall. Zeke Biggers had 40 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 1 sack, and 3 pass breakups for him. He's a big guy on the line that gets his hand up and blocks the ball. Joshua Robinson had some decent snaps last year, 9 total tackles for him, plus a pass breakup as well. They bring in a decent player in Thomas Gore, who I think could be really strong at nose tackle and stuffing the run. Want to see what he looks like this year. Micaiah Scott as well, 34 total tackles for him and 2 pass breaks, 1.5 tackles for loss. This unit has some nice return production. They lose their top tackle getter and top tackle for loss player, so that's a huge thing that they're going to have to try and find a way to replace that production.
Now you look at the middle of this defense. Had a few transfers come in and be big, but those guys are now gone, leading to a few players within the program needing to step up. Kyle Efford was pretty good in his near 400 snaps, though. Consistent tackler, should be very helpful against the run as redshirt sophomore. Trinias Tatum, disappointed immensely on the other hand, but was once assumed to be a critical starter and likely will be much better this year. Jackson Hamilton, barely played in 3 years at Louisville. He and E.J. Leitzel, who saw a few reps for Georgia in 2022, will compete for a backup role. Depth quite limited at linebacker, though. Effort, I think, is going to be a great star for him here, Nick. I think he'll certainly evolve into a leader. The rest of the group, though, certainly very questionable.
This is a group that has some decent pieces. Kyle Efford was top return tackler for this team, top tackler last year, 81 total tackles for him, plus a pick and a tackle for loss. He returns in that middle of that defense, looking to be a leader just as a redshirt sophomore, a young player. Trinias Tatum as well. Tatum did not really live up to the expectations last year, 38 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and a pass breakup for him. He needs to find a way to step up. They added some different transfers further down the depth chart. Jackson Hamilton is a guy that they hope could be involved for this. E.J. Leitzel as well. Want to see what he can look like coming over from UGA, flipping over from him. A good SEC guy that didn't really play a whole lot, but still a former player at UGA is a decent add for this team. This middle of this defense has some nice pieces, but I'm not entirely sure if they can step up to the level they need to be at.
Now you look at the secondary unit last year, I thought it was going to be pretty good. I considered it a strength, and it indeed was, and still returned some good players. Rodney Shelley probably was the weakest of the corners last season, will now step into a starting role, though. Amari Harvey, on the other hand, is quite good at 3 picks and 31 stops. Not bad for being a third option. Zachary Tobe was pretty good for Illinois. We'll need to establish more consistency in coverage, but is already a standout run defender. Warren Burrell spent 5 years at Tennessee and was uneventful, but be a solid backup option. Safety group led by standout Miles Brooks, who is fresh off an awful season where he drastically disappointed. He was considered to be an all-conference player on a first or second team basis, and he just was not very good. It's shown versatility, physicality, and just the ability to be in coverage in the past, though. On the other hand, Clayton Powell-Lee continued his surge following an impressive 2022 debut season. He's been a great run defender. He's been stable in coverage. You'll get backups Jaden Davis and Tay Seymour have no experience at all. Slot figures to be occupied by Omar Daniels, who saw nearly 100 snaps last year, although Brooks played lots of nickel as well. Good secondary here. Once again, I would say the safety group is a very impressive, Nick, if they can play up to their potential. Powell-Lee and Brooks at the same time. We want to see them be able to play cohesive football, and Brooks last year just disappointed. But if they can play at an equally impressive rate, Nick, they're going to have a very tough time being cracked.
Two good players here in Powell-Lee and Brooks that just haven't quite been able to figure out how to play together to get the best out of each other. Powell-Lee, 70 total tackles for him last year, 1 interception, 2 pass breakups. Brooks, 67 total tackles, a pick, and 6 pass breakups for him. Amari Harvey returns with 31 total tackles, 3 picks, and 3 pass breakups. Nice returning production there. And then Rodney Shelley had 17 total tackles and a pass breakup for him as well. Omar Daniels didn't have a whole lot of tackles during his snaps, only had 4 through 10 games, through a bunch of snaps. Further down at the nickelback position, I think this is a good secondary unit. I agree with your assessment. They were not bad against the pass last year, right? 53rd in the nation, 215.8 pass yards per game given up. I think there'll be a similar click again this year. This is a unit that does have some nice depth, some nice talent, and some good headlining pieces.
On to the verdict for the side of the ball. The Yellow Jackets have that aforementioned secondary to lean on, but if they continue to get demolished on the ground, it'll be hard to showcase much improvement. I think they take some steps forward as the D-line will make some progress, but the middle of the defense is more in flux. I think they'll take strides, but overall improvement seems kind of capped this year. As long as they can improve on third downs and find more negative plays in key moments, should be a somewhat stable unit. Looking at the final prediction for GT, they possess an impressive offense. They'll have great balance and improved playmaking, but this team's success will ultimately boil down to how much improvement they can showcase in the front six. GT will be hard to beat on most weekends and should show some good resilience. If the run D takes major strides, look out for this team to be a sleeper, as I think they can really contend. Obviously the schedule, Nick, is very difficult. 5-7 is not a good prediction. Obviously this team burned me last year with the disrespect. And I don't think I'm disrespecting them this year at all, because again, I just said they could probably contend. You got Florida State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Miami. A lot of people think all 4 of these teams will end up in the playoff, Nick. I've literally seen numerous predictions of all 4 of those teams in the CFP. So that's a hard basis to start with. And then your road draws aren't any better. Louisville, Syracuse, North Carolina. Virginia Tech. This is a very difficult schedule any way you put it, Nick, and I definitely think it's going to be hard for GT to crack a bowl game. I'll be rooting for them to do so because I think this will be a fun offense to watch all year long, giving them that A- grade. But again, this is a brutal schedule, and it's probably not getting much love for how tough it is. But man, when you look at it on paper, this is difficult.
This is a very tough schedule on paper, and I feel bad picking the Yellow Jackets to go 5-7 because I really do like what they're building down there in Atlanta. I've always said if you can get the right coach in there and be able to win their recruiting battles, there's a lot of talent in the state of Georgia, and especially in Metro Atlanta, playing in Atlanta, get this team back to national prominence could do wonders. I know they flirted with hiring Deion Sanders in the past. They ended up going with Key, which I think was a good hire in the long run. Key had good experience as an offensive-minded coach, as an O-line coach at UCF for a while, and then at Alabama under Nick Saban, a former player at this program who was associate head coach for a while, and now he's here. Took him to a bowl game last year when not a lot of people expected a 7-6 record with a win in the Gasparilla Bowl. It was pretty solid for him in his first full season in Atlanta. I like what he's doing. He returns a lot of talent on offense, a really fun, exciting offense to watch, certainly worth watching in my opinion. The defense has some question marks, certainly on the front part of the defense. I think the secondary is a solid unit. The linebacking core and defensive line do worry me a little bit, but this schedule is just brutal, right? You got to play Florida State week 0 out in Ireland. That's a team that has a lot to play for. They're very excited for the season. They want to show that they got burned last year when they were left out of the playoff. I expect Florida State to put on a big showing week 1. You got to play at Syracuse, who has that new look offense with Kyle McCord and Fran Brown coaching at Louisville, another team that had a great season last year that seems to be trending in the right direction. Notre Dame, their team that could get in the playoff as an independent. They are a really strong team. You're playing them in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. That's a tough spot as well with the Notre Dame. They're going to travel well, have a strong fan base, even though it's in the Atlanta area. At Virginia Tech, that's a team you and I are both very high on, tough to play. At that stadium in Blacksburg, they have a great environment there. Then Miami, a really strong team in the ACC, potential favorites to win this conference. And at Georgia, one of the best teams in the nation, if not the best team in the nation. Very tough schedule. All those losses are to very quality teams. And if you're a Georgia Tech fan, you can't be ashamed of losing any of those games. They're all really strong, talented teams. They picked off a couple teams. They upset Miami last year, a few different teams. If they get to 6-6, they'll be in a bowl game. I think you got to take them if they make a bowl game. This team has good energy, just a very tough schedule.
And I think ultimately they'll end up knocking off one of those teams. Played Georgia very tough last year. That game in Dublin will be against Florida State to open up the year, so an opportunity there to, I think, make some noise. And I think they'll end up covering the spread in that game. And then it's kind of a home environment, like I said, in Mercedes-Benz. Even though Notre Dame will travel a bit, it's still going to be, fairly much more comfortable for you. So I think this is a schedule where they can win 6 games, and I ultimately do think they'll probably pull one of those upsets. I don't have the guts to pick it, though, so we're going to stick at 5-7 for now. As always, Nick, appreciate you joining me breaking down Georgia Tech. Very interesting football team, one that we just are kind of disgusted that we have to pick them to only win 5, but I'd be very happy if they can accomplish more.
At the time of recording this, we're just 20 days away from them taking on Florida State at the Aniva Stadium out there in Dublin, and a very exciting, fun start to the season in Week 0. This is a team I'm excited to watch in Week 0. All eyes will be on them. I want to see what that offense looks like on that first game of the week. Like I said, all eyes are going to be on them. That's the big game, kick off the season. A lot of people will be watching and want to see what this offense looks like as they take on Florida State. I want to see what this offense can do all season long.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.